Have you ever been told that you should always be kind and put others first? It's good advice, right? But did anyone ever mention that being too kind might actually backfire? Imagine this. You're always there for everyone, helping out and being super generous. But guess what? Sometimes being too nice can actually hurt you. You might end up feeling drained, both emotionally and financially, without getting much back in return. Today we're diving into something really interesting. I'm going to share 8 surprising ways that being overly kind can actually come back to bite you. Plus, I'll give you 4 powerful strategies to make sure people don't take advantage of your kindness. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this. So let's get started and uncover how to balance your generosity without losing yourself in the process. But before we dive in, just take a quick moment to check if you're subscribed to the channel. We've got a series of upcoming videos packed with tips to help you improve your life. So, let's get started with the first one. You set your expectations too high. Imagine you're always the one who shows up for everyone. Whether it's helping with a project, lending an ear, or just being there when someone needs support. You're genuinely trying to be kind and generous, and that's great. But here's where things can go sideways. The Stoics, those wise old philosophers, had a saying that's still relevant today. They believed in accepting things as they are and not relying on others to make us happy. They taught that giving without expecting much in return helps keep us from getting disappointed and helps maintain a peaceful state of mind. Now, let's be honest. Even if we strive to be selfless, there's always a little part of us hoping that when we need help, others will step up and do the same for us. It's natural to hope for a little reciprocity. But here's the twist. When you're always the one giving, people start to take it for granted. They begin to expect you to handle everything, your issues and theirs, with no questions asked. And if you're not taking care of yourself, why would anyone else? It's like a one-way street where you're constantly giving, but the flow of support isn't as smooth coming back to you. When you make yourself available for everyone else's needs and neglect your own, you set yourself up for a letdown. People get used to your support and may not think twice about whether you're okay or if you need help. So while your intentions are all about being helpful and kind, the reality can end up feeling pretty frustrating. You're giving your all, hoping for some return, but instead, you're just left feeling drained and unappreciated. It's a tough spot to be in, but recognizing this pattern is the first step in making a change. In the end, those high hopes you have of people returning the favor often leave you feeling disappointed, tired, frustrated, and sad. But if we look at it honestly, people aren't really letting you down. They're just doing what you should be doing, taking care of their own stuff. All right, let's dive into the second point. People will only expect what you always give them. Think about this. You're the person who's always ready to help out, whether it's lending a hand with a project, offering emotional support, or just being there when someone needs it. It feels good to be helpful, right? But here's where things can get tricky. The Stoics had a really interesting perspective on this. They believed that true value comes from acting with logic and goodness, not just from doing what others want us to do. In other words, it's crucial to strike a balance. When you give too much, you're not just being generous, you're setting yourself up for some serious mental and emotional strain. Let's face it, people are creatures of habit. They love their routines and get comfortable with them. So if you're always the one stepping up and doing things for them, guess what? They'll start to expect it as the norm. It's like they've come to rely on you for everything, and over time they might even start taking your help for granted. Imagine you're always the person who volunteers to stay late at work, or who's always there to listen to a friend's problems. At first, it feels great to be that reliable person, but soon people start to see it as your role, your thing. They don't just appreciate your help, they expect it. And if you ever need a favor or some support in return, you might find that it's not as easy to get as it was to give. What happens next? You could end up in a situation where you're stretching yourself thin, trying to meet everyone's needs while neglecting your own. This constant state of giving can lead to unhealthy habits and really start to affect your mental well-being. You might feel overwhelmed, stressed, and even a bit resentful. So what's the takeaway here? It's about finding that sweet spot where you can be generous and supportive, but also protect your own energy and well-being. Because when you give too much, you're not just helping others. You're creating a pattern that's hard to break and can lead to more stress in the long run. This creates a comfort zone for them, where they don't have to handle many of their own responsibilities because you're doing it for them. If you don't value yourself, don't expect anyone else to step up and tell you to take better care of yourself. The truth is, people will just keep sticking with what's easy for them, which is having you take care of things. Let's dive into the third point. Your own goals will get ignored. This is where things start to get really personal. The Stoics had this incredible ability to live with purpose and reason. They believed it was essential to set boundaries and prioritize your own responsibilities. And honestly, it makes sense, right? If you're constantly putting other people's needs before your own, you're not only risking your goals, but you're also slowly losing touch with who you are. It's like you're chipping away at your own well-being in the process. Here's something to think about. Have you ever found yourself running around, doing everything for everyone, just to realize you're falling behind on your own dreams? Maybe it's that personal project you've been meaning to start, or that health routine you promised you'd stick to, but somehow, other people's needs keep getting in the way. It's frustrating, but more than that, it can be emotionally draining. You start to feel like you're living someone else's life and not your own. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes, the reason we overextend ourselves isn't just about being helpful. There's a deeper layer. When you always put others first, you might actually be trying to avoid something going on inside of you. Maybe there's a part of you that's hurting or scared, something you're not quite ready to face. Think about it. How do you feel when you're alone for a weekend? Or when you come home to an empty house and the silence starts to get to you? If you're filling your schedule with tasks and favors to avoid those moments, it'll eventually catch up with you. On one hand, you're postponing the inevitable. You'll have to deal with your own feelings at some point. On the other hand, you're setting yourself up for a mood crash because you're not nourishing your own needs. You might find yourself feeling irritable, exhausted, and maybe even a little resentful toward the very people you've been helping. Here's where it gets real. When you're constantly helping others, but never giving yourself the same attention, you're actually doing a disservice to both of you. Because how can you fully show up for someone else when you're running on empty? It's like trying to pour from an empty cup. It just doesn't work. So, what can we learn from this? It's all about balance. The Stoics knew that in order to live a fulfilling life, we need to make time for ourselves. Set limits. Say no when you have to. And don't be afraid to put your own goals at the forefront. Because at the end of the day, if you're not taking care of yourself, no one else will do it for you. Taking care of yourself is absolutely key to staying healthy, physically, emotionally, and mentally. You know how on airplanes they always say to put your own oxygen mask on before helping others? Well, life works the same way. Before you can really be there for anyone else, you've got to make sure you're feeling good, happy, and balanced yourself. Let me put it like this. Imagine you have a delicious box of chocolates. Would you give them all away before you've even tasted one? Of course not. You'd want to savor at least one piece for yourself before sharing the rest. In the same way, you shouldn't offer to run around cleaning your friend's house when your own place is a mess, or you haven't taken a moment to relax. It's about balance. Think about the last time you helped someone out when you were already feeling tired or overwhelmed. How did that go? Chances are you might have felt even more drained afterward, or maybe a little frustrated that you didn't have time for yourself. That's what happens when we try to give from an empty tank. But when you take care of yourself first, everything changes. You've got more energy, more patience, and even more joy to share with others, because you're coming from a place of fullness, not exhaustion. It's okay to put yourself first, and honestly, it's necessary. You deserve that time to relax, unwind, and do what makes you happy. Whether that's watching a good movie with a glass of wine, going for a walk, or just enjoying some quiet time with a book. When you're well rested and content, the way you show up for the rest of the world becomes so much better. You're not just going through the motions, you're genuinely giving your best self to others. So, next time you feel the urge to help someone, Pause for a moment and ask yourself, have I taken care of me first? If not, it's totally okay to step back, recharge, and then decide how much you can give. The world will still be there when you're ready, but you'll be showing up with the energy and love that both you and everyone else deserve. Next, let's be real for a second. If you're always putting other people first, people might start to see you as, well, weak. I know that's tough to hear, especially if you take pride in being generous and helpful. But here's the thing. People tend to take advantage of kindness when it's endless. The more you give without setting limits, the more others will think you're someone they can just keep pushing, someone who won't ever say no. And that's not fair to you, is it? Stoicism has this brilliant way of teaching us to be strong by taking charge of our own lives. It's all about setting limits, practicing self-discipline, and not being afraid to put yourself first. When you do that, you're sending a message to everyone around you. I respect myself and my time. And guess what? People notice. When you focus on your own goals and aren't constantly sacrificing your time and energy for others, something amazing happens. You start to earn respect, the kind of respect that's built on boundaries, not just generosity. Let's be honest, have you ever found yourself doing things for others just because you didn't want to disappoint them? Maybe you didn't want to seem selfish, or you were worried about what they'd think if you said no. But here's the truth. If you never say no, people will assume you never need to. They'll think you're okay with carrying their burdens on top of your own. They'll keep piling their responsibilities on you, knowing that you'll never refuse. It becomes a cycle, and before you know it, you're running on empty, doing everything for everyone else, and nothing for yourself. Now here's where it gets interesting. The moment you start saying no, everything changes. Seriously, it's like flipping a switch. People begin to see you differently. They realize that you're not someone who can be easily pushed around. You have boundaries and you're not afraid to enforce them. And that, my friend, is powerful. Think about it. When was the last time you said no to something you really didn't want to do? How did it feel afterward? Maybe a little uncomfortable at first, but deep down there was probably a sense of relief. That's because you stood up for yourself. And in doing so, you taught others to respect your time and energy. When you start setting those boundaries, you'll notice a shift in how people treat you. You'll stop being the go-to person only when someone needs a favor. Instead, they'll approach you with more care, knowing that your time is valuable. They'll respect your limits because you've shown them that you respect yourself enough to set them. And here's the beauty of it. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes you wise. It shows that you understand the importance of balance in your life. You're still a kind, generous person, but now you're not giving from a place of exhaustion. You're giving when you truly have the energy to do so. And trust me, that makes all the difference. So next time someone asks for your help, take a second to check in with yourself. If you're feeling drained or overwhelmed, it's okay to say no. In fact, it's necessary. Your well-being comes first. And by setting those boundaries, you're teaching others to value you in a way they never did before. Stoicism teaches us how important it is to be smart and wise when deciding who to help. With self-control and a clear perspective, we can spot the difference between people who truly need us and those who just want to take advantage. That way, we don't waste our time or energy on things that don't benefit us. Have you ever noticed that people who seemed like good friends only reach out when they need something? It's not surprising if you think about it. After all, most people don't invite their coworkers out for coffee unless there's a reason. It's understandable, but that doesn't make it right. That's why it's so important to learn how to protect yourself from being used. I'll share some tips on how to do that soon. Now let's dive into the sixth point. This one's a real eye-opener. When you're too giving, you'll start attracting people who only want to take and never give back. It's like a one-way street, where you're doing all the work while others just coast along, benefiting from your kindness. And it gets exhausting, doesn't it? Here's something to think about. The energy we put out into the world tends to attract similar energy. Have you ever noticed that when you're feeling down or stressed, you somehow end up surrounded by people who are negative, complaining, or just downright draining? That's no coincidence. Stoicism teaches us to use good judgment and patience to build relationships that are beneficial for both sides, ones where there's a healthy balance of giving and receiving. When you're constantly giving, always helping everyone else, something shifts inside of you. You drain your own energy without even realizing it. It's like running on empty, and that's when your personal vibration drops. And here's the problem with that. When your energy is low, you start attracting people who are also low energy. These are the folks who are negative, needy, and sometimes even opportunistic. They're not interested in a balanced relationship. They're here to take what they can get. Let me tell you a quick story. Have you ever met someone who seemed to always have a crisis? They need help. They need advice. They need you to solve their problems, constantly. You're there for them, offering your time, your energy, your emotional support. And what happens? They keep coming back, but it's never to check on you. It's always about what they need, never what they can offer in return. Maybe they don't even say thank you most of the time, and that can leave you feeling used, right? Well, that's because people like this are drawn to those who give without limits. They sense that you won't say no, and they take full advantage of it. And let's be real, those people, they don't care about giving back. They're not in it for the friendship or the connection. They're in it for what they can get from you. Maybe it's your time, your energy, or your emotional support. Whatever it is, they'll take it, and they'll drain you in the process. And then, just like that, they're gone. Sometimes without so much as a thank you, leaving you wondering why you're left feeling empty. But here's where things can change. When your energy is high, when you've taken the time to care for yourself first, you start attracting positive, like-minded people. These are the people who are joyful, hardworking, and willing to give just as much as they receive. These are the kinds of relationships that are truly worth investing in because they lift you up instead of dragging you down. It's all about balance. Yes, being generous is a beautiful quality, but it has to come from a place of abundance, not exhaustion. When you're giving from a space where your energy is already depleted, you're more likely to attract people who will take advantage of that. But when you give from a full cup, when you've taken care of your own needs first, you'll start drawing in people who respect and value that balance. So, if you find yourself surrounded by people who seem to only want to take, it's time to step back and assess. Are you giving because you genuinely want to, or are you giving because you feel like you have to? Are these people adding anything positive to your life, or are they just draining your energy? Answering those questions might help you figure out if you need to set some boundaries. And remember, it's okay to say no. In fact, sometimes it's necessary. By protecting your energy, you're making space for the right people to enter your life. The ones who are willing to meet you halfway, who value what you bring to the table, and who give as much as they take. All right, let's move on to the next part. But before we do, I noticed you haven't hit that like button yet. It's really important because it helps YouTube show our videos to more people and keeps our content coming your way. So go ahead and give it a thumbs up. It's free, and it means a lot. Thanks. And let's keep going. Next, this one's a bit of a tough love moment. You could end up getting addicted to something without even realizing it, and it happens more easily than we think. The Stoics believed that maintaining calm and control over our desires is absolutely crucial. Self-discipline isn't just about resisting temptation, it's about staying in charge of your choices. When you're disciplined in how you give, how you spend your time, and how you handle emotions, you avoid slipping into bad habits. But when you're always feeling like something's missing, whether it's love, validation, or even just peace, that craving can grow into something bigger, and that's when addiction can sneak in. Let me give you an example. Have you ever had a day where everything just felt off? Maybe you were overwhelmed by stress, or maybe you were just feeling empty inside. On those days, it's easy to reach for something to fill that gap, even if it's just a quick fix. Maybe it's a drink at the end of a long day, or comfort food that makes you feel better for a moment. At first, it's harmless, right? But if you're not careful, those quick fixes can become habits. And before you know it, you might be leaning on that drink or that late-night snack a little too often. Now picture this. One day, a close friend or family member pulls you aside and says, "Hey, I've noticed you're drinking a lot more than usual lately." Or maybe they mention that you've been gambling a bit more than what feels comfortable. What's your first reaction? I bet it's to get defensive. You might think, "Come on, I don't have a problem. It's not that bad." But here's the thing. That's exactly what most people say when they're starting to lose control but can't see it. It's a natural reaction to get mad, brush it off, and convince yourself that everything's fine. But take a breath here. I know it's hard to hear criticism, especially from people we care about, but often those closest to us see things that we don't. They notice the little shifts in behavior that we might be blind to. If someone who loves you is brave enough to say, "I'm worried about you," it's probably because they've seen something change. Maybe they've noticed you're turning to that glass of wine or extra snack a little too often. Or maybe they've seen you dive into work or distractions to avoid dealing with deeper emotions. Let's be real for a second. It's not about the drink, the food, or whatever the habit may be. It's about why we turn to these things in the first place. A lot of times it's because we're trying to fill a hole, to cope with feelings we don't want to face. And the Stoics were all about facing those feelings head on. They taught that real strength comes from within, from controlling our impulses and understanding the root of our desires. So the next time someone who truly cares about you pulls you aside and says, "I'm worried," instead of getting defensive, try to take a step back. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is there something deeper going on that I'm not addressing? And even more importantly, remember that the people who bring this up aren't trying to tear you down. They're trying to lift you back up before you fall too far. They want to help you regain control before that little habit becomes something that controls you. It's not easy to admit when we're slipping, but recognizing it early can be the difference between a bad day and a bad life. So, keep an eye on your habits, and more importantly, listen to the people who love you. They want the best for you, even when it's hard to hear. The Stoics knew that discipline starts with awareness, being aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it's affecting your life. Remember, it's all about balance. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to be mindful. So if someone close to you speaks up, don't just brush it off. Take a moment to really reflect, because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we most need to hear. Let's talk about something that happens all too often. People questioning your motives when you're kind. Stoicism teaches us to do the right thing regardless of how others react. It's all about staying true to your principles and letting your actions speak for themselves. But here's the hard truth. Genuine kindness is rare, and that makes people skeptical. When you're consistently generous, people might start to wonder what your angle is. They could think, why is this person being so nice? What's in it for them? It's not because they're bad or distrustful by nature. It's just that most people have been burned before. Maybe they've met someone who used kindness as a tool to manipulate or control them. So, instead of appreciating your gesture, they step back, questioning your true intentions. It's frustrating, right? You're just trying to help, and instead of gratitude, you get suspicion. But it's important to remember that this reaction isn't really about you. It's a defense mechanism that people have developed over time. The Stoics remind us that we shouldn't be swayed by what others think. Your goal should be to act in alignment with your values, even when it's met with doubt. Over time, your consistency will prove that your kindness is genuine, and that's when people will start to trust and respect you for who you really are. Now let's talk about what you can do to stop others from taking advantage of you. Strategy number 1, pay attention to how you feel. This idea comes from the Stoics, who believed that being self-aware is super important. You've got to tune into your feelings to understand yourself better. If you pay attention to how you feel when helping others, you'll know if you're giving too much and burning yourself out. This gives you a chance to adjust and find a good balance. How do you feel when you help others? You should feel light and happy, like you're walking on clouds if you're helping in a healthy way. But if you feel exhausted, angry, or taken advantage of, that's a sign something's off. Don't ignore those feelings. Instead, think about how the way you're helping others is affecting your health. If it's draining you, It's time to make some changes. Strategy number 2. Don't be afraid to say no. One of the Stoics' big lessons is realizing that your time and energy are valuable. You need to use them wisely. Saying no shows self-control, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed or when someone asks too much of you. The word no often feels negative, but it's essential for your own well-being. It can be tough to say no because we don't want to disappoint others, but if you never use it, you'll end up feeling drained and pessimistic. Practice saying no. Literally, look in the mirror and say it. It's the key to getting your freedom back and avoiding stress or unnecessary risks. Strategy number 3. Make time for yourself and protect it. According to Stoic values, self-discipline and self-respect are key, and that means giving yourself time to recharge. Do things you enjoy, whether it's exercising, drawing, listening to music with a nice cup of tea, or anything else that makes you feel good. Get your tasks done early, so you can make time for yourself afterward. This isn't just a suggestion, it's something you should take seriously. Schedule this me time every day or week and treat it like an important appointment. If someone asks for your help during that time, don't feel bad about saying no. Politely let them know this is your time and enjoy it guilt-free. If you want to be a bit softer, you can offer to help later, but make sure they know you only have a little time to spare because you have other things to do. Strategy number 4. Spot the energy vampires and stay away. Following Stoic principles, it's important to be smart about your relationships. Some people lift you up, while others drain your energy. The ones who drain you are what we call energy vampires, and they can take a toll on your mental health. By distancing yourself from these types, you're protecting your well-being and showing self-discipline. You might think you can help these energy thieves by listening to their endless complaints and negative talk, but it won't work. These people thrive on their problems, and if their issues were fixed, they'd just find something else to complain about. So don't waste your energy on them. It's not your job to solve their problems. Let's wrap this up with a key lesson from Stoic wisdom. Everything is about balance, and generosity is no different. It's like walking a tightrope. Lean too far in one direction and you risk falling. If you don't give enough, people might see you as selfish or uncaring. But if you give too much, your time, energy, or even money, you could end up completely drained, with nothing left for yourself. That's not just unhealthy, it's unsustainable. The Stoics would tell us that we need to find that middle ground. It's about helping others without sacrificing your own well-being. Picture it like this. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you're constantly giving, but never refilling your own emotional or mental reserves, you'll eventually hit a breaking point. So focus on giving in moderation. Enough to be kind, but not so much that you lose yourself in the process. And here's a little trick for when you're unsure if you should say yes or no. Remember the power of that simple word, no. It can be hard, especially if you're someone who's used to always saying yes. But learning to say no is one of the best ways to protect your energy. It doesn't make you selfish, it just means you're setting healthy boundaries. Like, let's say someone offers you a ride home, but something feels off. You don't have to say yes just to be polite. Trust your gut. And don't be afraid to say no when something doesn't feel right. At the end of the day, it's all about balance. You can be kind and generous without losing yourself in the process. And when in doubt, take a step back and remember that your well-being is just as important as anyone else's. We've come to the end of our journey together, and I really hope these tips help you out. Remember, you're an important part of this channel, so if this video made you think or helped you in any way, share your triumphs and challenges with us. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and drop a comment below. If you're unsure of what to say, just type "embracing challenges" to show you've made it through our journey. Your interaction helps fuel this community, guiding us all toward wisdom, understanding, and the art of turning every challenge into an opportunity. Here's to mastering the art of Stoic resilience together. Stay Stoic.